Hello, YouTube. Sidekick here in my brand new Mirage F-1CE for a second video about weapons employment. So if you haven't checked out my first video on using the F-1 to drop iron bombs, you might want to do that. Because today we're talking about slightly more advanced topics. We're talking about rockets and GBUs, which it may sound like a bit of a weird combination, but hopefully it's going to be clear by the end of the video why I put those two things together. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute here. First of all, though, let's just get the weapons panel set up while we're on the ground so we don't have to worry about that while we're flying into the range. Really all we have to do is select rockets. And then we're going to make sure we arm the rockets, and then we're going to set them to CPC or Chaque par Chaque mode instead of salvo mode. This just basically means we'll fire 4 rockets per launcher every time we pickle. And then we're just going to open the cover over our master arming switch. Okay, so let's review about rockets, the stuff that we have talked about in previous rocket science videos, which you may want to go back and watch if you haven't watched those videos on my channel, because I'm going to depend on the stuff we learned there a fair bit, and we did do it in a fair bit of detail. So the thing to understand about rockets is that it's really tempting to see them as a standoff weapon because you fire them in front of the aircraft. But they're not, really. Their advantage over bombs is not that they have increased standoff, it's that they are a lot easier to aim because they fly in a straight line. Well, at least they do if you're close enough to the target, which is why they're not really a very good standoff weapon, because you have to get close enough to the target to be in that straight line zone in order for you to be effective at aiming them. So if you don't believe me, let's just take a quick look at the rocket sight depression data that's actually provided in the Mirage F-1 flight manual. In the manual, sight depression tables are given for a couple of different attack profiles and as a function of altitude. Now, if you take that data and you put it on a chart, it looks kind of like this. But what's more instructive is if instead of looking at that data as a function of altitude, you actually look at that data as a function of slant range. When you do that, it looks like this. Now, you notice a couple of important things about this graph. First of all, the points are a lot closer to lying on a single line. But the second thing is that there is this defined flat spot at the bottom of the graph, which is basically the area where the rockets are flying straight. So this is the range where you can actually aim straight at the target, and it doesn't matter how far away you are, the rockets will hit the target. And that's the advantage of using rockets. If we launch them in this zone, then it's basically insensitive to our dive angle and our speed and all of the other factors, because if we launch the rockets in their flat trajectory range, we can just aim them at the target, not worry about anything else, which is what makes them easier to use than bombs. Okay, we're just about ready to take off, so we'll continue this discussion here in a sec. Let's just get down the runway, get the afterburner lit here, and we're off. Wait for 120. And rotate. And wait for her to come up. Which she does. And gear is coming up. Get the flaps up. And wait for 300 to pull back on the afterburner. Okay, so while we're doing that and heading out to the range, let's just talk a little bit more about rockets. So what we can do with that slant range chart is actually look at a different dive angle. Let's say about a 25-degree dive angle, and I'm just choosing that because that's similar to the dive angle we used in the iron bombing video. You'll remember we were diving at around 25, 27 degrees. So let's take a 25-degree dive angle. We can kind of guesstimate where the points will be based on the other points. So I basically put the blue triangles on this graph using the other data as a guide. Now, the interesting thing that I can do then is I can actually convert all of these slant ranges back to altitude, and we'll end up back with a chart that looked like the first one, where we plot our sight depression versus altitude. And it looks something like this. Now, the value of all of that graphical sleight of hand is that it's basically saying that if we choose a 25-degree dive angle at a pretty good speed, the higher the speed the better, we should actually be in the flat trajectory range anywhere under about 3,000 feet, certainly by the time we get down to 2,500 feet. So that basically amounts to saying that we can use the same attack profile that we did for iron bombs. We're going to dive at around 25 degrees. We're going to release the weapons at around 2,500 feet, but we won't actually have to worry about any kind of sight depression, and we won't really have to worry about how sensitively we hit that dive angle or that speed, and that's the advantage of rockets, and that's what we're going to go out and check out right now. Okay, we set up the weapons panel earlier. While I've been talking, I have switched the master arm on. Very important to remember to switch the master arm on. So, we're going to use the pickle button to fire the rockets. If we press the trigger, we will fire the cannon, which is not what we want to do. I should point out, though, that the other advantage of launching the rockets in the flat trajectory range is that you can use the pipper for the cannon as well as the rockets, because we aren't going to use a sight depression. So we're going to go after the big circular target, kind of the main target on the range. Just need to pull over here a little bit so I'm not too close. But again, as we're going to find out, it really isn't as sensitive to me flying this pattern as carefully as I did during iron bombing. In fact, I can be pretty sloppy and we'll still get pretty good results. So rolling in, remember to use the rudder as we roll in. Pull the lift vector to the target. We're going to use that ladder. Take the ladder over the target, and then we're just going to pull the sight, the pipper, right up to the middle of the target. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is that our heading information is right where the target is, which is not really convenient on the HUD. We're going to have to fix that. Just waiting, just waiting, just waiting. There we go. And as you can see, now that we launched those fairly low, but it was a good, accurate shot. Okay, so we are going to have to change the brightness on our HUD. We do have a dial. The leftmost dial will let us turn the heading indicator, basically brightness way down. Unfortunately, we're also going to lose our attitude cue there. We're just going to have to live without that. So take a look at the target information tracking system data. Good drop. Or good shot, I should say. But a couple of things to notice about that. You can pause the video and look at this if you want. First, we did launch from fairly low, but the other thing is look at the dispersion of the pattern of the rockets. The dispersion of the rockets is much wider than our actual accuracy. So the rockets really are an area weapon. They're covering a fairly large area around the target. So even if we aren't exactly accurate, we are going to pick up the target with at least some of the rockets, which again is one of the advantages of rockets, because they're a bit of an area weapon. We just don't have to be as accurate with them. And when we go back and look at the cockpit here, you can actually see that's a good thing, because while I've been talking about it, I've been getting kind of sloppy. We're up almost to 12,000 feet here, so we're going to need to pull back the power, lose a little bit of altitude. But again, the thing I want to point out is that our results on the target are not going to be nearly as dependent on flying an accurate pattern, because we don't have to hit those dive angle and dive speed numbers as accurately as we do when we use bombs, when we're using rockets. So long as we're firing the rockets inside the flat trajectory range, we don't need to be nearly as careful about how we approach the target. And that, again, is the advantage of the rockets. They're just a much easier weapon to use. But you still have to get pretty close to the target. So let's roll in here again. We'll just try another run at the target. Let's see if we can launch the rockets a little higher this time. 1,500 feet is probably a little lower than we really wanted to. Okay, so we're coming across, picking up the target on the left-hand side. Don't want to get too close to it. Still got to lose a little bit of altitude. Speed's good. Now, I like to roll in fairly slow just to give me time to line up on the target. Once I'm lined up on the target, I tend to advance the throttle again, because it is good to launch the rockets at as high a speed as you can manage, because that's, again, going to keep them flying straighter longer. Alright, getting ready to roll in here. Again, rolling in with a nice coordinated wing over, pulling the lift vector up to the target, trying to get the ladder up to the target. It's not a great roll in. Get it up. So it's taking me a while to get lined up, which is not good. So I'm probably going to be a little lower than I wanted to be again when I launch. Right around there. So yeah, as you can see, another accurate shot, although again a little bit lower than we probably would have liked to have been, and a lot of that was just because I was not very efficient in my roll-in getting myself lined up on the target. I didn't have to launch that low, but I just didn't feel like I was aligned until that point. So let's take a look at the results. Okay, so again, we were a little higher that time, and still pretty decent for accuracy. Again, the spread of the pattern is a lot higher than our accuracy, so that's good. And we're well within that slant range. The slant range was only about 1,200 meters, and we figure we've got something in excess of 2,000 meters in the flat trajectory range. So again, we're well within the flat trajectory range. So let's do one more, see if we can get a little bit higher to launch. And again, I've let the jet get a little bit high here while I've been talking. So we're just throttling back and trying to get back down closer to 10,000 feet. So while we're getting set up, the other thing to notice, if you go back, you can rewind the video and take a look at the results there. You'll notice that actually the launch parameters are quite different. The first one was at about 1,400 feet at about a 26-degree dive angle, something like that. The second one was at 1,800 feet at a 28-degree dive angle. Now, if we were dropping iron bombs, that kind of difference in our release point would have a dramatic difference in the accuracy of the bombs. But with the rockets, we basically hit the target both times. So again, I know I'm belaboring the point, but the point here is that rockets are easier than bombs because they're easier to aim. We're not any farther from the target when we're launching them, but we are a lot less sensitive to having to fly very precise approaches, which, at least for me, is a good thing because that's not one of my strengths. Okay, so going around again here, getting back down towards 10,000 feet, 300 knots. That's still where I'm trying to roll in. Again, rolling in a little slower, just useful for making sure we get lined up. And one thing I want to try and do here is get lined up a little bit more efficiently than I did the last time, and still see if we can launch just a little higher. Nice smooth roll in, pull the flight vector, the lift vector up. Let's get it up a little bit faster. Get the ladder on the target. Oops, gone a little bit past it. This is better. All right, now we just need to ease the pipper up to the target. Don't want to pull because that will affect the aiming point. And right around, wait, and right around there. Okay, that was better in terms of being a little bit higher and still a pretty good shot. So let's pull out here and see what Target Impact Tracking System has to say to us about how that shot went. You know what, and while we're waiting for that, I do want to give a plug for Draken's target information tracking script. It really is, as far as I'm concerned, a marvel of modern software engineering. Let's see what results we got here. Okay, that time we're over 2,000 feet, and back down to a 26-degree dive angle, and again, only 11 meters from the target, and basically the dispersion is covering the target. So, you know, I think those are all pretty decent results. You know, as I was saying, I really do think that if anybody wants to build their own range and spend some time practicing, you really should look up Draken's target information tracking script. There's a whole bunch of functionality in it that I'm not even beginning to touch, although we're going to use it a little bit more this video than we do have in the past, because we're going to use the target designation functionality. But it really is a great piece of software, and it's actually really helping me improve my flying in DCS, and I really can't recommend it enough. Okay, so this time we're going to do a slightly harder task with rockets. There is a bunker over in the right-hand side of the target range, and we're actually going to go and see if we can take out the bunker with the rockets. And spoiler alert, it's going to be really difficult to do this very well, which is what's going to set up the last part of the video about using a GPU. So, I have switched to salvo mode, by the way, from CPC mode. So we're first shot here, we're going to use all the rockets that are left. If we go around again, though, we'll be able to fire all of the rockets in the pod. So you'll have to trust me that the bunker is down there. This is one of the issues here that we're going to discover here, is that the bunker is really difficult to see until you get fairly close to it. So lining up on it is an issue, and even if we had more of a standoff capacity with the rockets, we probably wouldn't be able to use them, because we just wouldn't be able to identify the bunker early enough for it to do us much good. And the second problem we're going to find is that because the bunker is small and hard to identify, it's really hard to pickle at the right time. And there's an added complication we're going to see right here, which is that there's a little bit of a hitch in the get-along. I ended up firing those quite late, but I pickled about a fraction of a second before they actually fire. In salvo mode, there is a small delay between pickling and firing, which can really upset your aim when you're looking at a point target like we were there. So that wasn't a particularly good shot, and target information tracking system confirms that, not on a particularly effective strike. So I'm going to go around and do it again. So the thing I learned from that run is I want to aim the pipper a little bit below the target when I pickle, and let the pipper continue to come up, and that way hopefully I can distribute the rockets all the way across the target. And so we'll do this one more time, see how we do actually taking out a bunker with rockets. So to point out, these are not particularly heavy rockets. They're even lighter than the standard 2.75 inchers that are typical of US loadouts. The Matra F4s are 68 millimeter rockets. So they really are fairly light and fairly short range. And in fact, it's fair to say that they're really only an incremental improvement, just as the 2.75 inch rockets were. They're really only an incremental improvement over rockets that were in use at the end of the Second World War. So really what we're looking at here is a technology on a late 1960s, early 70s fighter that's still deploying weapons that were basically invented in the 1940s. And this is what the United States discovered in Vietnam, that while their weapons and their weapons delivery techniques had not really changed all that much from the Second World War, the lethality of the air defenses really had. You had surface-to-air missiles, the SA-2, that prevented them from ingressing at any kind of altitude because they basically denied the high-altitude airspace. And then you had radar-guided AAA that really was beginning to be pretty lethal, certainly under 5,000 feet, and really even under 7,000 feet, which was the drop altitude that was often being targeted. That's a pretty high drop altitude when you consider we're dropping at 2,500 and to get decent accuracy. So we'll talk a little bit more about that after we've done this run. So let's see if we can get a slightly better run on the target this time. Again, I'm just looking at about where it is because I actually can't see it, at least not in DCS at this altitude. We'll get rolled in here. Hopefully we can start picking it up. I think I see it now. Get the ladder on it. Get the pipper below it, and again we're just going to aim to start our strike with the pipper just a little bit below the target, and we're going to try and go all the way across it with the rockets. Alright, that was impressive. And I think it would have been pretty hard to have hit the target any more thoroughly than we did there with this weapon system. But as you can see, the best that we managed to do is around 20% damage to the bunker. And that's why I chose the bunker as a target. It's a very hard target, and a light weapon like the rocket is just not going to do it a lot of damage. And if that bunker was protected by any level of AAA, it would have been unlikely that we would have survived that attack at that level. So, all of which is to say that this is just not working, and it was not working for the U.S. In Vietnam when they were attacking essentially undefended targets that didn't have dedicated AAA, which was basically targets in South Vietnam in close air support missions. There wasn't a lot of AAA that reached above a couple thousand feet. It was mostly 14.5 millimeter at the most, machine guns, basically. But in North Vietnam, around fixed targets, the level of AAA was truly staggering. Often hundreds, sometimes even thousands of guns, everything from 23 millimeter, 40 millimeter, 60 millimeter, even up to 100 millimeter guns. And they could reach easily up to 5, 6, 7,000 feet, and because they were radar guided, they could be very accurate. And it just wasn't working using World War II weapons against those kinds of targets. And so starting in 1965, the United States started developing a number of different kinds of precision-guided weapons. And by 1968, they had successfully developed a laser-guided bomb, which basically means that if you shine a laser at a target, the reflection from the target can be picked up by a detector that's sensitive to that wavelength of light. And it can be used to actually guide a bomb directly to the target. And so that's what we're going to demonstrate how to use that with the F-1, but also demonstrate just how much easier it is. So to do that, we're going a little bit farther away, going a little bit higher up here around 14,000 feet. And now we're going to turn in, and then once we're established on kind of our target base leg here, we're going to go to the target information tracking script, and we're going to request it to designate a target. Now, the bunker that we just attacked is the only target that I have set up to be designatable. So that is the target that we will get. Normally you would get a random target out of the ones that you picked to maybe be able to designate. Okay, we are still going, so it's designated, it's ready to go. We are still going to turn in towards the target area. The early laser-guided bombs were not very aerodynamically efficient, so you still basically had to get them on a pretty good ballistic trajectory before you launched them, but you didn't really have to aim them at the target. You just had to get them aimed in the general vicinity and make sure that you were high enough that they would be able to guide themselves. So we're going to do kind of a standard roll-in. I'm just looking at that area between the two wood lines there, basically. And I'm just going to roll out flat, and when everything is stable, we're just going to pickle the bomb. And there it goes. And then we can break off. And we don't even have to get close to the target. And the bomb is flying towards the target, and it is guiding because we have... there's a ground unit that I set up on the range that's basically continuing to illuminate the target. I'm just trying to pull around here so we can maybe actually see the target here when the bomb hits it. So it's down there between those two wood lines down there. And, well, we know it was successful, although literally from the range we're at, you really can't even tell. So, how much easier is that to take out that bunker than what we tried to do with the rockets, and how much less dangerous? And so it's not surprising that over 28,000 laser-guided bombs were dropped by the U.S. in Vietnam, and that actually over half of them actually made direct hits on the targets they were aimed at. It's actually a really interesting story, and you should look it up. Anyways, that's it for this video today. Just going to take a look, fly by and see the damage that we have caused, because that's always kind of fun. As always, if you are enjoying these videos, please like the videos and subscribe. Definitely leave a comment. That's always helpful as well, and I enjoy hearing from people, especially if you have questions or comments. And if you have any ideas about other things you'd like to see tested on the F-1, let me know. But for now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.